All right. Well, welcome to my monthly Histories Untold Stories in America discussions, and it's under my civic minded umbrella and Substack. And I would like to welcome Sharon Kyle. She is the co-founder and publisher of LA Progressive, and she is a board member of the ACLU. If you haven't checked out LA Progressive, it is a wonderful online magazine, and it really gives us so much information about what's going on in the current climate. I will drop the link in the chat so you can guys check it out. And so yeah, and if you have any, for some of you that haven't been here before, you can either drop questions in the chat or raise your hand, or even again, this is such a small, intimate discussion here. You can just join in without even doing all of that. So so Sharon, the last time we talked or you did your interview, I think it was either the last week of March or the first week of April. And it feels even right now like a lifetime ago in a way because so much has happened, I think about, gosh, the big bill that we're dealing with right now, legal residents of that have immigrated here, them being deported. Gosh, the attack on Iran without talking to Congress at all, completely unconstitutional. The birthright citizenship, regarding the Supreme Court. There's so much going on, and it's just crazy. So let's first start off with the Supreme Court's recent ruling, that's threatening birthright citizenship. How should civil rights advocates prepare for legal and cultural consequences of such a decision?
Well, that decision, it's somewhat complex, and in some ways it's very simple. The decision that was made by the Supreme Court this week had very little to do with the substance of the article. It wasn't on the merits. It wasn't on whether or not the status of immigration should be impacted. It was about nationwide injunctions. It was about whether state courts, when they issue an injunction, whether that injunction should impact the entire nation. So, for example, if there is a case in the courts, and let's say it's something in New Mexico, and it's dealing with immigration status, if an injunction is placed, it's usually imposed because the courts need to make a determination on the case, and they feel that they want to maintain the status quo, or they want to stop what's going on until they've come to a resolution. And if the decision has to do with immigration is a federal issue. That's why they would issue a federal injunction. But the Supreme Court decided yesterday that state courts can no longer impose a decision that would impact the other states. And that's why I say it's complex, but at the same time, it's very simple. In some cases, there are progressives or left-leaning people who might think, well, that's a good idea. In other cases, not. In some cases, the far right, they wouldn't want an injunction placed on the entire country for a Second Amendment issue, a guns rights issue. But they might want the state only to deal with an abortion issue. So that's the simplicity of it. Either way, it's temporary. Mm-hmm. The actual merits of the decision, that hasn't even been discussed with the court yet. What they were talking about is whether or not the federal injunction should be maintained, or if they should strike it down, and they did.
Okay. But what is the ultimate goal, do you feel, like with them starting here?
What is the Supreme
ultimate
Court
goal? Right. Like, as far as because Trump is the one that really brought it to the Supreme Court, correct or no? Who
Yes.
brought it to? Okay.
Right. But, the Supreme Court makes a decision about which cases they'll hear and which cases they won't hear. So the Supreme Court is approached hundreds of times a year. But in fact, they maybe take 25 cases in a year.
Okay.
So it's both. It's the Trump administration approached the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, they have shown so far to weigh heavily in his favor. Mm-hmm. And whenever he approaches the Supreme Court, I'm trying to remember. It seems like I remember one case where the Supreme Court decided not to hear his case. But at other times, I think they've pretty much heard any case that he has taken already all the way to the Supreme Court level. So why is it that Donald Trump would want to challenge this birthright citizenship? That's what I've been wondering. And of course, I'm not in Donald Trump's mind, but I think it's because, and thank God, but I think it's because no, but you know what? I think it's because it really feeds. It's a win-win for him. It feeds the red meat of his base. Mm-hmm. He has a base that clearly is anti-immigrant and very specific kind of immigrant. Because let's face it, people come to this country from all over the world.
Right.
There is a large contingent of people in the United States whose visas have lapsed or expired, or they've continued to live here long after their visas period is covered. Mm-hmm. And they come from Canada. Mm-hmm. But we don't see anybody grabbing them on the streets, knocking them down and punching them in the head.
Right.
My husband and I yesterday, we went to, we live in Southern California. We live in Los Angeles. And we went to the farmer's market to grab something quick to eat before we went to see a play, an excellent play about Greenwood, Mississippi. And the play covered a conversation between Sidney Poitier and Fannie Lou Hamer. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think of I can't think of the third person. Anyway, before we got to the play, we stopped to get a bite to eat. And adjacent to the farmer's market is a place called you guys know the place on 3rd and anyway, it's lovely. Mm-hmm. It's like a mall, but it's sort of Disneyland-ish. And
it's the Grove.
The Grove?
The Grove.
Right. The Grove. Mm-hmm. So we're at the Grove and at farmer's market. And I went to the World Market and it was just a beautiful day. And the Grove has a lot of high-end stores. It appeals to a certain demographic. And my husband says to me, and my husband is white, for people who don't know me, don't know anything about the LA Progressive. My husband's name is Dick. We're Dick and Sharon. We're the publisher and editor of the LA Progressive. And we often talk about issues of race. And my husband says, notice how we don't see anybody being knocked to the ground, heads bashed in. As we walk along the road, I said, yeah, that's right. Something like that. And then there you go into other parts of town. You go into other parts of town, and the streets are there. You know, people are afraid to come out of their homes. Mm-hmm. And that goes to what I was saying about there's a certain kind of immigration that the far right doesn't want. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And they're brown and black.
Right. Yeah. And I've been writing a lot about this one gentleman in particular, Sejun Park, who was born in South Korea. But he's a friend of mine, one of the editors I used to work with. And he had posted about him about 3 weeks ago and where he was detained in detention. But then it looked like he had been released, but that wasn't the full story. So at first I was alarmed. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe they, got everything together. But then but I found out this week because he was sent back or actually asked to be self-deported on Monday. Came to the country when he was 7. His mom was here. He was a war vet, a Purple Heart recipient, actually. And then because of being at work, at war and getting injured and so forth, and he had PTSD. He ended up abusing drugs, but and then got caught with, cocaine. He served his time. He was sentenced to 2.5 years. He served his time. And for 14 years, he's been completely clean and everything has, been good in his life. And he's been doing all of his regular reports that he has to, because if you, I don't know if you know, or for the audience, I mean, because Sharon, I'm sure you know that if you are from a different country and living here as a legal resident, if you've been convicted of a crime, you have to check in after you are released, you have to check in every year with employment and that you are clean. And so he's been doing that. And all that was good. But because of that and his record, they sent them back. So luckily there have been a lot of reports, talking about this, and this petition going around to try to get him back. But he's not the only one. There are so many other cases I'm reading about that this is happening to. What can we do about situations like this? And anyone, if anyone has any questions, please chime in. Please, let's see. Sharon, John says, what do you think about the U.S. taking in refugees from South Africa, allegedly escaping persecution? What does that tell us about the intent of the current administration?
Where the chat at?
I don't even think you need to interpret that. I think
I found it.
That screams at us.
Sharon, that's why I brought it up, because I think it's very clear, but I just wanted to hear your perspective on that.
You beat me to it, John. I was going to bring that up too.
Right. So, when you consider the amount of power and sway that Elon Musk had in the first 100 days of the Trump administration, he himself, who is South African, his family's wealth comes from off the backs and the sweat and the blood of Black South Africans in those mines. I think that it's pretty clear that South Africa and the way that they have dealt with their people of color is right in alignment with the Trump administration and the extreme MAGA right. Now, I'm not going to say all Republicans because I don't really think that that's true. Mm-hmm. In some ways, I'm grateful that he is so blatantly, obviously racist, because it's causing many people to wake up and then they have to ask themselves, how long am I going to continue to vote? More than half of this country voted for him. The country needs to wake up and look at this mirror. That's what Trump represents. He is a mirror reflection of a dominant force in this country. And we have to ask ourselves, is this what we want? And for those of us who have been apolitical, so many people say, oh, I'm not interested in politics. I don't engage in that. Well, either you get interested in politics or you just let politics do all the harms that we see. You are as guilty as Trump if you don't do anything about this.
Exactly.
Sharon, I just wanted to ask about that a little bit more about the voting thing, because I do often hear people talk about, half of the country. I think it's half of the voters who showed up. I do know that, right? I just want to clarify, because I think that's very important for us to all recognize, is that there was 110 million, I think, voters who did not.
There was 70 million that stayed home.
7 million, right?
Exactly. Oh, I thought it was more than that. I thought it was
70 million that could have voted. There are even more people who never registered but could vote.
But that's a problem right there. And that's where these conversations need to begin. Is, first of all this bottom line, I'm sorry to go there, but it's economics. It's numbers. It's always about the numbers. And then secondly, the civic-minded, why I do like her calling her civic-minded Jones, but the civic-minded illiteracy is as bad as the financial illiteracy. It's 80% of our population. And when you got that many people who don't want to inform themselves, and you say, I always say, if you don't take interest in yourself, your money won't compound any interest for you. And it won't. And so they don't take interest in these things. I think the last conversation, she had a doctor on here too, who talked about the interest in our own lives, the interest in our evolution, our interest in the growth of, each other and the kids. Where are we going? Not like Wayne Gretzky used to say, not where the hockey puck is, but where's the hockey puck going? And why aren't we interested in that? Because
I once read an article where someone addressing this lack of interest, this apathy, and he attributed it to the United States being too successful. And by that, he meant people, the vast majority of Americans, could live quite comfortably, have roofs over their heads, eat 3 meals a day, have their basic needs met without being engaged civically. And for that reason, there are a lot of people who have just let it slide. And that's why I'm kind of grateful for things getting as bad as they are right now. My prayer is that will be enough of motivation that will trigger enough people to get up and get information. But Yul, I want to piggyback on what you were saying about people taking the reins of their lives and learning more. I don't think that it is an accident that you can pick up the paper and not learn anything about politics. This is by design.
It is.
Oh, yeah, indeed it is. That's what I'm saying. Right? It's about numbers.
So, I'm assuming that everybody here on this call has at least gone K through 12. I'm pretty sure that's a safe assumption, and others, I'm sure you guys have degrees. You can go from K through 12, you can get your bachelor's, your master's, and your doctorate, and not understand anything about our political processes.
Exactly.
And the financial illiteracy sticks in that category too. Because when you got poor, broke people, now I got to grovel, beg, steal, and borrow, lie, and cheat for your products, services, and good, because you won't empower me. You won't allow me to become empowered. And that's intentional. You don't empower me in politics. You don't empower me in financial. You tell me I can play sports, I can play music, I can learn a little math, but not the math I actually need to succeed. You're giving me nothing in my academic, and I'm just saying where I came from. I'm already here. I've been here. I'm the 65-year-old intern. I've been here a minute. I was a cat before y'all was kittens. You hear what I'm saying? And so now I have grandsons, and I have my daughters, and I have their timeline as well. None of that's taught to any of them.
Sharon, I have a question about the media in general and news coverage, like Yul was talking about. You're right. A lot of times we see it's really infotainment, right? Everything is a spin. There's an angle. There's an objective. It's not pure reporting of facts and just letting you know what's going on and let you make up your mind. And I think that's kind of led to a loss of critical thinking, that people are no longer taking the time to examine the facts and maybe even examine both sides and then consider what's the truth in that mix. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that in terms of, media coverage always having a spin, being infotainment, and how that's influenced people's inability to be critical thinkers.
So I don't know if you guys have all heard of the Powell Memo. Back in
Can you repeat that too?
The Powell Memo.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Okay. So so for people who aren't familiar with it, I'll just give you just a brief background.
Talking about Jay Powell?
Lewis Powell.
Okay.
Okay. So Lewis Powell, at the time that this memo was written, Lewis Powell was an attorney, and he was representing the tobacco industry. This is back in 1971. And he wrote a memo because, now keep in mind, this is 1971. So this is on the heels of the successful Vietnam protests. Well, so we were starting to pull out of Vietnam, getting rid of the draft. This is on the heels of the successful civil rights. We had the Voting Rights Act. This was on the heels of the beginnings of the women's movement. And Lewis Powell saw all of these movements, the women's movement, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement. He saw all of these things as being detrimental to the prosperity of the nation. And he felt that the business sector should have more say-so in what happened politically. Now, today, in 2025, we know that corporations are heavily engaged, pretty much. I mean, that's what, right. They run it. Corporations.
Let's not lie.
But he should have learned from history, because Rockefeller and Carnegie and J.P. Morgan, they bought McKinley into the White House.
So listen, right? So, but he did learn, and so when Franklin Delano Roosevelt served his 4 terms, he was the president that was involved in most of the major social changes that shifted power from the corporations, from the carpetbaggers, and all of those very, very wealthy corporate interests. Powell was taken away from them. And the reason that Powell was taken away from them was that Franklin Delano Roosevelt could see the writing on the wall. At that time, we had a very strong socialist party in the United States. Back in 1932, it was growing. It was growing as a result of the lack of money. The Wall Street fell. And so what Roosevelt did was he shifted power. He changed the tax base, because he believed that that was going to be the only solution, or else we would become a completely socialist nation. So this guy, Lewis Powell, he was pissed. And so were the moneyed class. They were always upset with the actions that were taken by FDR. So their intention was to reverse them. And that reversal started with the Lewis Powell Memo. It's an 8-page memo. I have it on the LA Progressive. The Powell Memo, if you do a Google search for Powell Memo and then do in quotes LA Progressive, so it'll take you to the LA Progressive. The memo addresses 8 domains where conservatives and corporations need to regain power. And one of those domains was the media. And so that's where you see the media being gobbled up by corporate interests. And that started out slowly, like in 1971. It started to pick up steam. I'm going to say by the 90s, it was becoming clear. And you saw changes in the Federal Communications Commission, where there was a time when one entity couldn't own a radio station and a television station and print media. There were regulations to try to place controls on the complete domination by one entity. But all of those things were just taken away. And so what we see now, like if you listen to MSNBC, you'll never hear them talking about what's happening in Gaza and how bad it is for the Palestinians. The focus is always on Israel.
Yeah. And I think Joy Reid spoke recently on another podcast saying that she believes that's why she was let go, because she kept bringing up Gaza.
That's right. Did you see her on Charlemagne the God?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where she brought that up.
Right.
And she of course was fired, and I know it must have been emotionally and psychologically traumatizing for her, but she's in a much better place now doing her own thing.
I agree.
So in answer to your question, John, corporate media is propaganda media. Independent media is where you can get it, but independent media it's not resourced well. And so a small outlet like ours, the LA Progressive, we rely on a lot of people that were laid off from the LA Times. They feel compelled to write, so they still write, but there's a lot of opinion pieces in the LA Progressive, a lot of analysis of other other media outlets' content. So we do an analysis and then we spit it back out through a progressive lens. I'm trying to incorporate more, provide more educational, like I'm writing a piece right now, 100 things you can do. We're always telling people they need to vote, but there are there's a lot more that you can do to be civically engaged. And I'm making a list of 100 things and then providing links so that people can go and do those things.
Yeah, that's great, because people are always wondering, like, well, besides voting, besides calling, your representatives, what else can we do? Yeah.
become
Yeah.
shareholders.
He's that
I'm just
part.
telling y'all missing the whole thing. It's all money, baby. It's all economics. It's all numbers. And the reason this is not taught at a starting, let's say, I would say elementary, but at a middle school level, then into high school, and on, from civic mindedness to financial literacy, all the things that a child or this next generation is going to need to succeed. It's not enough to get a trophy. It's not enough to be valedictorian anymore. It's not enough to be the fastest guy on the football field. You could get a Nobel Peace Prize. You get $1 million for that. And if you don't know what to do with the money, you broke by the end of the year. It's gone. It's out the window. It's given back to the people who gave it to you. Just like all the football players and NBA and WA and all of this hype with the media. That's why they needed the control of the media, because the media guides all the minds, tell us what to think, when to think, how to think it. And if you're not thinking for yourself, and that's why it's not, how's this not installed into education? What we have a lot of dumb kids coming out, graduating, coming out saying they know something, and they don't know any of this.
No,
They don't know the institutions. They don't understand the policy. They don't understand the three branches of government.
Right.
No.
And that's why I did the series that I did, because
Insane.
I leaned heavily into civic education, because even if they didn't have a class or don't even want to look it up on the internet, I had people discussing how the government works and giving them information and how they can participate, because they really, we do talk about that as well, that how civic education has lessened over these past few decades. Being a kid of the 70s, it was really ingrained in us about civic education. And so, but they don't have it these days. But I was discussing with Paul Carisse, who is a professor at Arizona University, I believe. But he's also part of these other civic organizations. And he was explaining how over time, how it became less and less, because it was always a discussion or a disagreements about what should be taught, and that's the way they framed it, of not wanting to address certain issues, mainly a lot of stuff about race, and so
isn't the Constitution, that's one thing you made clear in the summit you had, that I got out of it from a couple of your people, but it's clear in the Constitution. It's in the Constitution, people.
Yeah, if people just follow the Constitution,
if you just follow
we would
what
be
the fuck
fine.
you wrote down in the first place,
right?
You just follow that. We wouldn't be having these discussions,
exactly.
such as equal rights for all human beings.
Right.
I don't need another parade for this group and another one for this group. That's all propaganda, money machines making more money, print out more propaganda, more pamphlets, create more committees that don't get shit done. And
so what's incumbent, right? So what's incumbent upon us, those of us who can see, we can see the problems, particularly those of us who are on the hurting side. We're the ones that are receiving the pain. People of color, women, we're very sensitive to what's going on. But I'm in a place in my life where I've seen enough, I've read enough, and I'm really looking for solutions. I don't want to just highlight the problems. I don't need to highlight the problems. Donald Trump makes it very easy to see the problems.
So Sharon, that's another question I had. I'm sorry, Yul, I just wanted to ask this
one.
Go ahead. About action. You kind of brought this up earlier, and you talked about this list of 100 things, and I'm very interested to take a look at that. But I think one of the challenges is people do understand what they can do on a group level, but on an individual level, they're not sure what to do and where to begin. And I think it would be really helpful to just start at the level of one person. What can I do? Said 10 million people, by the way. So I think it's important for us to remember that there is value in that. And I'm just curious if you have any sort of thoughts around, just from an individual perspective, what types of things can we be doing? And then from a group perspective, and as Yule's pointing out, there's all these different organizations, all these groups running rallies, doing different things. What can we be doing? What should we be doing in order to evoke change? That's what we're really looking for.
How do we install it in the education system where it belongs? So
That's
the
right.
kids and the youngsters, because maybe we're all too
Yeah.
fucking late. Excuse my language. I'm sorry, Miss Kyle.
No,
But
I'm not Miss
but
Kyle. I'm Sharon, but no, it's never
Sharon, I'm
too
sorry,
late.
Sharon.
It's never
But
and believe it or not, Yule, I am older than you
oh, you looking
by a
good,
few
girl.
years.
You are doing it well.
Thank you.
But
So
because if we're not too late, then they definitely are not. So that's the installation that has to take place. How do we install this civic? How do we teach this to our youth, as well as financial literacy, empower them with that as well, and teach them how to succeed in this? Since I was old enough to hand my hand out, 14, 13, 14, someone has asked me for money. All the way through 15, 16-year-old, 17, got my first apartment at 19 in college. But only people has had their, to this very day, by the time I get off of here, somebody wants some money from me. So why aren't we teaching these? How do we install this into this, to the education of the
I think
future,
that's
of
a
the next
great point.
generation?
It's a great point about access to understanding how it all works. The other part of it that Sharon, I think, was touching on was people are not motivated because they're really basically too comfortable. I mean, Sharon, is that
It could be
right?
the
What you were
truth.
saying is people are disinterested because of the fact that they are not in enough pain. And Sharon was just mentioning earlier that people of color, women of color, are more sensitive to it because you're already in pain. It's
Right.
just
I
more
was gonna say
inflamed
we
now because
live
of what's
like
going
this.
on, right?
Mhm.
So Sharon, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that perspective. Does that sound right to you, or am
that's
I off
that.
base?
No. That's absolutely right. And all I can do when I speak of an individual, I'm going to speak from my own personal experience and what I did and how I evolved and how I became what some might call radicalized. So I was working for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and felt very comfortable, felt I had arrived. I was doing exciting work, working on large spaceflight projects. At the time that I was working there, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was the largest of NASA's centers. A lot of people, when they think of NASA, they just think of one organization, and it is one organization. But you've got a Space Flight Center in Houston, Johnson Space Flight Center. You've got Kennedy Center. You've got one Goddard Space Flight Center in Ohio. So there are 13 different space flight centers. And the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is the one here, closest to where I live in Pasadena. And it was the largest. And there were a little less than 10,000 people working there when I began working there. And it's physically located in Altadena. If anybody knows anything about Altadena, Pasadena, you know that they have a pretty sizable Black population.
Mm-hmm. Historical Black population for
historical
Altadena.
Black That's correct. Sadly, the fires have changed that. But yes, a historical Black population. And the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is physically located in Altadena, but they had the zip code changed so that they could be Pasadena. The other thing that I found very interesting when I first started working there is that they had 10,000 people. I kid you not, there were less than 200 Black people, both male and female combined, less than 200 in a geographic region that was 14% Black. So I thought, well, how could this be? Then I started to just do my own random observations and collecting information. And I noticed that the Black and brown people were disproportionately represented among the janitorial staff and the cafeteria staff, but among the scientists, the engineers, the business administration people, they were extremely underrepresented. And so I just started keeping notes. And that was the beginning of my radicalization, because I came to work with some really brilliant people, and they appeared to be so blind that they were actually being racially discriminatory. That's when I decided to go to law school, because I wanted to find out what laws are they violating, and how is it that they can so blatantly do this and no problems there. Well, that just sent me on a whole, I went down the rabbit hole. I did
a major one.
I went to law school. I graduated from law school. I started teaching law. I became the president of law school, founded the LA Progressive. And now I've just been completely into understanding how the divisiveness of racism actually is stopped us. I don't think we've ever had a democracy. It stopped us from even having a democracy. And I think will lead to the dismantling of this country unless we can come together, because you've heard of divide and conquer. So you've got to come together. So I belong to an organization called Coming to the Table. And Coming to the Table is an organization that is, the memberships are the descendants of people who were enslaved and the descendants of the enslavers.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And so we come together once a month. And I had a meeting just about 2 hours ago with I'm on the steering committee. And we talk about ways to uncover, expose whiteness, white superiority. I've come to the conclusion that white supremacy is one of our most pressing problems in the United States. But secondary to that is white silence. Secondary to that is white silence, not just white supremacy. But
that's why they still call it the White House. Why they still doing that? It should be the House of America. Let's cut it out. We got a lot of black slaves buried underneath that damn house that built it. But even our black representatives still continue to call it the White House, because they knew if they did this, this was psychological shit. They do these tests way before you could imagine. They knew it would dominate. It's like the William Lynch story of 17, whatever, if you ever read his thing. But they knew it would dominate. It would be supremacy. It would lock into the minds that the white was the superior race. It would be dominant. I'm not putting this correctly, but the supremacy would continue to dominate because people would continue to call it that, continue to represent it that way.
There are all kinds of subliminal. Yes, there are so many subliminal
and it
ways
stays right there.
that superiority is maintained. And part of the reason that we come together at Coming to the Table is we talk about how can you dismantle something when you don't even identify it, call it out, and give it a name.
What it is.
Right, exactly. And then that's
why they call it institutions. It's instituted.
Right, yeah.
So you can't, you have to dig it up literally to get rid of it.
Right. And that's why even in the series, I had a segment regarding the Costa paintings from Latin America, because that really influenced their belief or hatred of themselves, or other, Black people too, because they, as the person that I interviewed, she's a professor, and she studied the whole thing, where it was kind of like the social media of its time, the 15th and 16th hundred. They had these paintings, the Costa paintings, and it really influenced to really hate Black people, and so, and that goes from generation to generation. So you get this initial belief system, that whiteness is right, and we're talking about, 400 years ago now, 500 years ago. But that's still, because you pass it down to your kids, and they pass it down to their kids. And that's still why we have colorism, in the Latin community. And we still have, I don't feel it's as bad in the Black community as it was. I mean, even up into the 80s, early 90s, we still were dealing with that majorly, but it feels a little lesser.
Even Black
now.
people follow that.
Right, that's what I was talking about.
That's why white boys got the best weed. We know that right away, right? That's what they say, right? Or they have this, or they do this better, or that better. Even a Black person say, "Will I take the accountant? That's white, or I'm gonna take this brother over here, who's an accountant." Right. And I'm telling you, line them up, you're gonna see a lot of brothers going right to the white accountant. Right.
But it's also, it's because of the belief system that has been instilled in us, and not having the right education,
and
proper education to. Sorry again.
It's even a strategy. I'd rather sue him before I take my brother down. I know I can get him. But I don't know about this Black dude over here, this accountant, if he gets me. but I get this white one, and I can
But it's
sue him.
really important. It's really important that we understand the root causes, because one of the reasons that there is so much hatred and so much anti-Blackness is because originally white people couldn't really live with themselves for what was happening. They had to find a way to legitimize slavery. And so you say, okay, well, these people are deserving. They should be treated this way. And we should extract all of our wealth from their labor because they're just not worthy. I mean, how else could they sleep at night?
Exactly.
I still wonder how they do it today. Eckhart Tolle, have you ever read Eckhart Tolle's book, The Good Earth?
Yes.
And it talks about the pain body that we all of us, from Scottish to Irish to Russian, you name it, we all carry some pain body. I still tell people, try to imagine just one massacre, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I can go on with Seneca and Black Beach, and I can go on, but just one. After the complete demise of Tulsa, Oklahoma, there were no relocation programs. There were no job opportunities for those people. There were no medical or mental care. There was nothing to help that group. Just imagine, where did you go? What did you do? How did you survive? And actually, they're still asking themselves that question today. That's why we are considered a powerful people. Because how the fuck do they keep coming back? No help whatsoever for just this region of a massacre, of ruining Black prosperity and Black futures and growth, and how some of them had started to think better of themselves and their possibilities in this country, and they just shattered it. With no post.
Yeah, no aftercare.
No aftercare whatsoever. And we carry that. Timothy, Sharon, Danita, John, April, Lisa, we carry this pain body that we didn't even, I had nothing to do with it, but it's an energy. I believe a lot of times this country cannot, I don't know if anybody listens to Abraham Hicks or Esther, or if you know that lady, but I do believe that we cannot collectively move forward because we continue to celebrate these pains. We continue to have to remember how bad all this was. So we can't go forward because we keep coming back. July 4th, we're going to do it again.
So this brings up a great question then, is how do we move forward? Let's talk about that. We can talk, and I think you raised it.
We got to give up the past.
We only have 15 minutes left. So let's get to this next question.
On an up note, but I mean that's great. I mean you're right, but it's like, to look backwards, we're not going to move forward. So how do we get over this?
So this is where my hope comes from, and I started to talk about coming to the table, where the descendants of the enslaved and the descendants of the enslavers, and what we're experiencing is opportunities for healing. Like Yule said, we can't move forward until we heal. It's like, it's a cancer. And you can't just see like the symptom of a cancer. So the symptom, let's say the symptom of a cancer is a lump. Someone has a lump in their breast and say, that's been identified as cancer. Well, I'm not just going to say, I'm not going to think about that. Let's just cover that up with some pretty clothes and let's go on to another day. That's in the past. No, it's living inside of you right now. And until you address it, it's going to continue to grow. And that's what's happening. That's what we're seeing. The growth of it, we're seeing. But we're also seeing, whenever someone places their intention on healing it, there is something wonderful coming. Like when I talk about my husband, who is a white man. So my husband, he's white. Honey, come over here. He just came. See what I mean?
He's been in the background all this time.
He wasn't there. His t-shirt says woke. His t-shirt says woke. So he wasn't here.
He just pulled him in like a front.
He was asleep.
I went to the store and he just came in. We do interviews and stuff. But anyway, my husband was raised in middle class Minnesota. Both of his parents had PhDs. He comes from a very stable, very white community. He had one Black friend growing up and a girlfriend, which we won't even go into that. And I come from the Bronx. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I'm of Caribbean
I was
and
shot in the Bronx.
right. So we come from different backgrounds and we see through different lenses. And when we first came together, we would argue quite a bit about these issues. That doesn't happen anymore. We've been together now for more than 20 years. That doesn't happen anymore. And what he sees now, he couldn't see 20 years ago. So when we went to the Grove yesterday, and he's the one who said, I don't see anybody getting their heads bashed in around here. This is coming from a white man from Minnesota. What we have to do is gain empathy, but you can't gain empathy when you live so separate. That's why I believe that segregation harms us all. We've got to be able to come together and see through each other's lenses. And then where I can see through my own relationship that there is a healing. And I think that we have the capacity as a nation. I don't think people want to be racist, but segregation is a major contributing factor to it.
Right, exactly. If you're not, or deal with or interact with people from different backgrounds, then you just go by your perceptions or what you've been taught by other people without actually really knowing firsthand. I see Lisa, she's still driving and she's not coming, but Lisa, do you have any questions? Do you want to just put them in the chat while we have about 12 minutes left, or Timothy?
I got some real quick. It kind of piggybacks something John said earlier, and then looking for solutions. It seems to me, from what I'm seeing on social media and in the media, like, the news and what's supposed to be the news, critical thinking is being suppressed, because I'm seeing that whenever someone criticizes the government, whether it's on the left, I see it more on the right, but whether it's left or right, then there's that, you're not a patriot, or this is the best country in the world. How dare you criticize? I'm like, look, man, wasn't it John Adams that said we're supposed to be critical? And I remember when I was in high school, I took a class called critical thinking. I got to college, I took a class about how to recognize propaganda and false documents. It seems like right now, even engaging with people, like, I'm a liberal. I have no problem saying it. I lean more to the left. I have no problem with people on the right. I have friends who are on the right, but when I try to engage in conversations with some of these folks, they're giving me the conversations. I'm like, where are you getting your resources from? Because what you're saying is obviously not true. So it seems like part of the solution could be, hey, let's get the young people to recognize that it's okay to be critical. You should be critical, and how to recognize if something is false or not, especially now with AI. I mean, the things that are out there now, people are commenting as it's factual, but it's not. It's like, because I'm older, I can recognize that this is BS. But a lot of these young kids, no, this is real. No, this don't. I'm like, dude, that is not real. So that it just kind of pisses me off a lot with a lot of this.
Yeah. So age is a big factor for me. Obviously, in a year and a half, I'll be 70, and so I've seen many decades. So I know.
Like you got that white husband over there.
Looking good.
but as a result
messing my camera up.
but as a result of living as long as I've lived, I've actually witnessed things that have educated me. Living long, traveling, because I have a lot of concern about young people who aren't able to discern truth from mistruths. It's difficult when you haven't lived much.
Right, it is, and I was in a conversation with Jane. I think her last name is Kaminsky.
To be installed.
She is the president of the Monticello Center, Thomas Jefferson's. And so she was saying to me, because when I met her up at Stanford for the Civics event there, and she said that as a professor, they can't even say critical thinking. they have to reframe that verbiage, and which I was like, how can we get rid of critical thinking, or even saying that is critical thinking? It makes no sense to me. So, but that's what they're dealing with too right now in academia. So
yeah, because I think that it could be a residue from the opposition to critical race theory. And but there's a whole body of critical thinking and critical theory that doesn't have anything to do with race. I mean, so
exactly. Right. Exactly. It's being able to really discern. And before, hold on for 1 second, because Lisa has a question, and I want to make sure she's able to get it in before we go.
Hi, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation and discussion, and I always have learned so many things when I'm talking with Benita on her podcasts. And so this is just a question or an observation that I wanted to hear what Sharon had to say. First of all, I come from my grandparents, labor leaders, social movement, progressive family, and I still feel like I have so much to learn. But you'd think it would be passed on. But the thing I was noticing, and I don't hear people talking about, are these paywalls for all different kinds of news. And we're talking about the paywalls for just like, you're talking about mainstream news, which is not, always telling the truth, but still, I think just your everyday people don't always have access to any kind of news because of the paywalls to get news. So Sharon, do you have anything to say to that? Maybe I'm not, I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
no,
right. There was a time when you would have to go and buy a newspaper. Somebody's got to pay the salary of these reporters and pay for the structure that they report out of. So news doesn't come for free. Now, with the internet, that sort of changed things. And now we've developed a culture where people have come to expect that their information comes for free. But the truth of the matter is, even that doesn't come for free. You're inundated with advertisements.
Money.
Right. Well, money, because you need to buy stuff. You need to pay your mortgage. You need to eat. So these are fair exchanges. So the paywalls is just one payment model that some news outlets use. There are other models like the LA Progressive. My husband and I actually do need money. We need to eat. I need to buy clothes sometimes. And so we don't use a paywall. And the reason we don't use a paywall is because it's more important to me that people read and become educated. But we ask for donations. Now, when you ask for donations, you're going to get a lot less than if you put a paywall up. If you put a paywall up, people are forced to pay. If you ask for donation, you kind of have to rely on people's just good nature and rely on the fact that people can understand that what they're doing is they're consuming something that somebody took their time to prepare. So that's how I feel about paywalls. It's just one payment model.
Okay, Sharon, I completely understand and agree. And of course, yes, we had newspapers and people paid for those newspapers. I'm just thinking about people trying to get different, opinions and go to different newspapers. And then there's just for a lot of them, they're like, I'm just from my personal experience, I try to go and read all over. And then I was like, I can't afford to pay for all these different subscriptions. Maybe I should. I'll definitely join up with you, Sharon. I'm going to join LA Progressive as soon as we hang up and pass it on to my family and friends. But it's not that I don't think there's value and reporters should be paid. I just think right now we're in such a state of emergency, honestly, that it's like, oh, I can't reach this really, really smart paper, which I think might be smart because I don't belong. So anyway, it's just it's out there,
You get all your news from TikTok. A lot of people getting that news from TikTok, and I just shake my head. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, there's addressing another thing that needs a solution too, is that we have stopped reading. There's 60% of even the country don't even read above the sixth grade level. And that's a problem.
It is a problem.
Again, we're back to education.
So what we've done at the LA Progressive is now all of our articles have with it embedded an audio version of the article. So you can listen to the article. You don't have to read it. We do a lot of videos and embed it because we could see that we were losing readership because people and the younger generation, as many of our readers are dying, because the demographic that was attracted to us is my demographic, my age, people that are 65 plus. And of course, that size of that demographic gets smaller every year. I guess new 65-year-olds come in, but so that's why we've added we've added the audio component so that you can listen to the articles.
Right, and that's very helpful. When I go on there, I have been listening to their articles, and I really love the last one that you did. Was the backdoor military.
I wrote that one.
Yeah,
I wrote that one.
And it's so true. I shared it on my Facebook recently too. So, we got someone. Hi, Diana. We're about to wrap up. Is there a question that you would like to ask before we wrap up?
No, I'm just glad I caught the tail end. I've got intense respect for Miss Kyle, and thank you for having this session. I think that I am intending to be an example to demonstrate to the young people that I have influence with, they're part of my commitment to integrity is to find a few sources.
You cut out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just went through a dead spot. Sorry. Sources of information who also stand in integrity and consistently, and that I don't need to worry about finding my news because I've already made that selection of what inputs come, because my nervous system can't handle all of the regular news, and my commitment to my nervous system and that I deserve to have a regulated nervous system.
I hear you on that.
I agree.
I don't watch the news anymore because they make choices for me, and I don't do that anymore. So
good for you.
I make choices for my inputs, and so I think it's really important to model that for our young people.
Yes,
because when you allow, stuff's coming at us all the time, and so we showing I was just hanging out with my little friend. She's 9 years old, and I watched her get so worked up, and so we laid out. We did some. That is my drink water and breathe alarm that reminds me to every hour and a half I have an alarm that reminds me that I deserve a regulated nervous system and to take those 5 breaths and a sip of water. So sorry about that, a little interruption. But by modeling this framework of gratitude and consistently on purpose, it's in my calendar, in my alarms, to do that for myself. I don't wait, my well-being depends on it, and then I've got bandwidth for this information that matters. And that is so what would you recommend as the ways to really demonstrate these pillars of integrity and civic mindedness for the young people that are just overstimulated and they've only got bandwidth for so much? How can I start to integrate some of this civic mindedness into these conversations with these young people? Thank you.
So thank you so much for that question. It depends on the individual. There are really a lot of great podcasts. There are a lot of great websites, but you got to sample them. and do that sampling. I can't, I don't know that. I mean, I have my favorites.
Well, let us know what those are. Mm-hmm.
Well, I like Macro and Cheese. That's a podcast. I like Bad Faith. Brianna Joy Gray said she's a young woman who is quite brilliant. I pretty much listen to them regularly. And there are others that I listen to with a Code Switch. NPR has a great podcast, Code Switch, and that deals with racism. Or there are others that like Science Friday. So it just, I have a lot, but I'm in a phase in my life. You know, I'm not a mom anymore. Well, I'm still a mom, but my kids are grown and I have a grandchild. So I'm in a different place in my life. There are people who can't do that. You know, they got to get up in the morning and go to work. I own my business. I come down to my office and I don't have a boss tell me what to do. So you just depend on what phase you're in. There was a time in my life I didn't have 2 seconds for myself. I'm nursing a child and trying to get ready for work, and so it just kind of depends on where you are in your life.
And let's see. And Lisa says in chat, I'm not on TikTok, but joining LA Progressive. Thank you, Sharon and Dick. So we're gonna wrap up. Any final words, Sharon?
Well, I so appreciate you guys being here and looking for answers. I'm trying to improve the LA Progressive to make it more educational friendly. It's written, most of the contributing authors are at one time worked for like places like the LA Times, or they were professors. But I have a powerful glossary that I've been building. And check it out. Look at the glossary. We want to make it more user-friendly, and we're working on it. But I want the LA Progressive to be the kind of publication where if you're reading something, you don't understand it, you can just go to the glossary and look at the words that were in that article.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate you. I love talking to you. And we still have to get together and have coffee one of these days.
Well, and thank you for reading my last article. It took me a while to make the connections. This is the way my mind works. When I talk about the backdoor draft, some people don't even understand what the backdoor draft is. They think we don't have a draft anymore. Oh, yeah, we have a draft.
We do. You know what? Let me see. I think I have it. Let me see nearby. Let me see here. I drop it in the chat too. 1 second here.
And you guys
I have
don't
so many tabs open here.
Listen to it.
Let's see. I will drop that here. And when I read it, I thought about my friend. She's not on here right now, Jerry Juhigu. She did a series about veterans, for veterans and and their families and people who love and support veterans. She did that back for Memorial Day. But in reading your article, just really connected me with what she also is talking about, because there's so many people, Black and brown people, who got into the military because they could not afford, college education and
or life.
Right. Well, true. But what they did was kind of really trick them, into getting into the military in high school, And so she talked a lot about that with various veterans and how it really affected their lives,
Yeah. Yeah. My husband is a veteran, Vietnam veteran. He was at Columbia University. So he had an automatic deferral. He didn't have to go. He enlisted himself voluntarily because at the time there was a draft. But he decided to go into Vietnam. And now he gets medical treatment from the Veterans Administration. And we go there, and it's amazing to me how many of the people who are patients are Black and brown people. It just goes to show you how there is a disproportionate representation in the armed forces of people of color.
It's always the numbers, baby. Always the numbers.
Diana says, I'm still hopeful for the conversation about NASA. Yeah.
Sure. We can do that another time. I'd be happy. So I was there for 23 years.
Cool. Well, I'd love to have you back. It was so great.
Okay.
And thank you all for attending. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Good seeing everybody.
Bye-bye.
LA Progressive.
LA Progressive.
LA Progressive.